Well, hello. It's so nice to see both of you again. I'm so glad we're getting together again. And already it seems like the field is percolating, full of things to talk about. We had just about 5 minutes before we started to record, and already it's like a little galloping horse. So we'll start. Um, Ron, I'm just going to ask you again, what are the things that you've been thinking about?
Well, Mindy, when I actually heard this morning that we had the opportunity to get together, and I started to say to myself, okay, what is it? What is the thread of my thoughts, over the last week or so? And what might I, bring into our conversation? So I've been thinking about that. And what is coming up for me is the place or the capacity of what is called the imaginal mind uh, to shape our world and to shape my personal world or each one of our personal worlds, but also to shape the environment around us. And that comes up in part because I've been doing an online workshop with a friend of mine, and she focuses on well-being in the body. And she made the statement the other day that how much the story that we tells ourselves our affects our body, affects our health, and affects our outlook in the world. And so she said, which I found fascinating, which I'd never thought before, is from the body. The story that we tell our body is what the body responds to. And so the imagining stuff, our imaginal mind from the body standpoint has the same power, the same capacity to influence the body as does whatever the story is. So if we're telling ourselves that we are actually able to live in health and well-being, we're influencing the body to respond to live in health and well-being. And that was a kind of a revelation to me. And I've been working with that in terms of what my story is. What is the story that I kind of tell my body? And one of the stories that I tell my body is, oh, I'm getting old. And I'm concerned that I won't do what I want to do because I'm getting old. And so that's a story. That's a story that I have, it's you might say subvocal, but it's a story that I tell myself. And so I'm saying, well, what happens if I don't tell myself that story? So that's kind of led me into this sense of, what is my experience when I'm working with the she? I'm going to be doing what we're calling a pop-up, a presentation on my own work with the she this coming Sunday. And one of the things that I've been considering and reflecting on in my own work is how I experience my relationship with the she is so much fashioned by my own imaginal mind, my own imaginal self, and how much that's been influenced in a certain way by my personal experiences, the movies that I've watched, the fantasy novels that I've read, the stories that I've heard from other people, so that when I experience something out with the she, I know there's a validity there, but I know that I see it through the lens of my own imaginal self. So that's a topic that's kind of been brewing in me over this last week or two.
Ron, what you're saying is so interesting. And what comes up for me, I too have been in spring, and there's a whole level of imagination in the nature world right now because it's imagining itself into bloom. It's I had planted a patch of yellow tulips outside our back door, and they've been gradually swelling. We've had a lot of back and forth with our weather. It's been warm, and then it's been cold, and it's warm, and it's cold. And these tulips have been getting fuller and fuller. Their bulbs are just round and just about bursting. And then finally, we had a few warm days where they burst open, and they grew like 3 or 4 inches overnight during one of the warm times. So the little buds were down low, and they were getting fatter and fatter, but they were still down low, close to the earth where it was warmer. And And so when it actually did warm up in the air, they grew literally 3 inches. Oh my, you've grown since I've seen you last overnight. But what struck both my husband and I as we've gone by them is there was also a imaginal realm around these blooms, which was their imagination of I'm being called out, what they were becoming, what the flowers that they were becoming, the joy that they were becoming to be able to be in bloom. It's a slightly different context of imagination, but nature, I think, is, and I certainly see that in the garden or in a seed, they have their own, there's imaginal realm there as well. It doesn't come through the same kind of mind as we use, but there's an imaginal realm in nature, and especially visible now with all the blooming and such, we are walking through all the time. So it's not only an imaginal realm that I generate, there's possibility, that sense of imagination, that sense of moving towards something in the environment, in the ecology that I'm walking through as well. And that impacts my capacity to imagine. So that's where the imaginal realm has been living for me.
Okay, so this is interesting. So the first thing that I wonder when I hear both of you talking about this is, what exactly is what words would you use to define imagining or imagine? Because Ron, for you, to substitute imagine to perception, and we get into a world of theory and conversation that is known of, the world that's before us is the world that we perceive, and our perception is what makes it so, and that's different for everybody. Those are common ways of talking about existence and what's really going on here. And yet you've put in the word imagination in a similar context. And I'm wondering, is there a difference? And what is imagination to you? Because that word could mean a lot of things.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's come up in other things that I've read. Some people describe that there's a difference between the imaginal mind or the imaginal world and fantasy. And I'm going to make that distinction to a certain extent from my experience. So when I use the word imaginal, particularly in relationship to my experiences in nature or my experiences with subtle beings or so on, what I'm meaning is that I am engaging energetically. There's a vibe. There's a shift in energy around me, or the shift in the field around me. And I know that is taking place. The way I interpret that energy shift, or the quote visions, or what I hear, I feel like is colored by my own framework, so that you might be experiencing that energy field in a very similar energy field, we'll say. And what you would experience it would be more colored by your own lens, so to speak, your own coloration. And the reason I want to distinguish that from fantasy is that there is fantasy, and I've learned to tell the difference. It's like when my mind goes running off and is imagining, for instance, that I'm winning the lottery, and then what am I going to do? Would I want to hide out so nobody ever know my name, or whatever the fantasy is? To me, there's a difference because the energy hasn't necessarily shifted in me or shifted in my environment. It's my mind spinning a story. And that's how I distinguish it. So, for instance, I had an experience the other day where I lifted up, I was in our greenhouse and I lifted up planter, not a planter, but a group of there was one of these things where all the plants are in. I'm lifting it up, and there was a whole ant nest underneath there, and the ant eggs, and they went all into an ant frenzy whenever you disturb a nest. And I had to these are my seedlings, who are my wife's seedlings that I'm taking care of, and I have to move them. And I'm going to disturb their nest. They got to go. This is not a good home for them. Later, and a little bit later, I decided, well, I would like to just connect with the ant, the larger ant spirit, whatever that is. And so I let myself open up to that energy. And it's similar to what you're saying, Freya, opening up to the energy of the nature blooming. There is this incredible force of new life coming up. Well, I had an experience where I felt like the ant spirit showed up, and that was an energetic shift that I knew. What I heard from that ant spirit, or what I experienced as, say, the form of that spirit showing up, like a 4 foot tall or 5 foot tall ant standing on its back 2 legs, that's me. But the energy of whatever that was related to the ants, that is real. And that I accept as real. So how I envisioned it, like I can talk about the 4 foot ant that was telling me that there's, how to put this, just to care for the ants. That was the story I heard. We know you disturbed the home of these ants. That happens. There's no blame, but you can still care for us. That was the important thing. It was receiving the energy of knowing that I could care for the ants. So that's how I would try to explain what I'm talking about.
I still have the same question. Thank you for that. But I still wonder, so you did a bit of delineating between imagining and fantasy, like between what your mind can kind of go beyond maybe what's in front of you to a different realm to perceive what is true, to what your mind would love to think is true, and just la la la. That's on one end of the spectrum, but on the other, I still ask about the difference in your definitions between imagining or imagination and perception.
Oh, okay. I'm hearing your question a little different. I want to sit for that can come back to that a little bit. And Freya, maybe you have something to say, but I hear the question differently, and I want to just see if I would like to sit with that. Yeah.
I don't know if this is answering the question directly, Mindy, but there's something for me about the imaginal. So imagination is something that I usually think of in terms of I create it. It's a generated thing from my mind in terms of traditionally thinking about imagination and the fantasy side of it. It's like we project something as, oh, is this possible or is that possible? And we create pictures. The imaginal, I realize for me, is a more full engagement. We might use the word felt sense, drawing on multiple senses to hold possibility. That's the imaginal realm to me. And it's slightly different. So imagination that works just through our mind and sort of, oh, I'm creating this idea, I'm creating that isn't a full-bodied connection to the whole ecology of what's building the future. So imagination is slightly, at least the way I would use it, imagination is slightly isolated with just as a mental capacity. But when I speak to imaginal, and I've been using that word more just to remind myself, go into this as a more full-bodied relationship. And in that, see a different kind of connection to the future, or to possibility. So it still opens up, and my mind is a part of that, but it's not the only generating source. And that gives it more substance for me. It also slows me down. So I'm not by myself in creating possibility. And that's sort of what, like the tulips, it's like they were very yellow and they were involved in their blooming and doing things. And in my imagination of that energy, in working with it as sort of an imaginal field that I walk through, it touched me in a lot of different ways, not just in my mind. And that was a more full-bodied relationship. And that's how I am working to see, does that difference make a difference? And it does, I think, for myself. It brings substance into imagination for me.
Yeah, Freya, I would really agree with that. I like the term substance because there is substance there.
In this moment of pause, it may be a good time to wrap up this version of our podcast. There's so much here to talk about, and I thank you both very much.
Another bite, another time.
Yeah, thank you, Mindy, for that question, too. I think it's really worth consideration on perception and this deeper level of imaginal perception. Yeah.